folks. Welcome to a podcast about Catholic things. I am Eric Engel, the ambassador of common sense. And this is Dan Engel.
I'm the ambassador of nonsense.
Oh, there you go. I was going to say 50 cents. I don't know how you get to be ambassador for money, but... So, let's see, you've got the subject for today. And actually, we're recording this a week later because we got a little bit behind. I had to move. So if you were expecting one last week, the one we're doing now is going to be listed as last week's, but we're a week late in recording it. So,
but that's okay.
Let's see. Yeah,
some things are worth waiting for.
Let's see. We're talking about one of the parables, aren't we?
Yeah, I was gonna talk about the parable of the talents. It's often
we got
called
a thing
that.
to do, though. I asked you a question.
Oh, that's right. You asked a question last week.
We're looking at black membership in the Catholic Church being extremely low. And I wanted to see if you had any idea why.
Okay, I have an idea, and I actually have two ideas. And one of them is historical and would explain why the Catholic Church would be very slow on the momentum, of getting black people in the United States into their parishes. And the other is more of a current situational, which would explain why it continues to be slow moving forward. So my historical explanation is this, and I'm gonna say some things that are I think suppositions on my part, but I think that they're probably true. If there's any research out there to support them, and anyone feels like they want to supply that would be great. Or if somebody is aware of some research that suggests otherwise, that's fine. We'd like to hear that too. But here's my thought on that. So black people in America, first of all, I think they tend to have a lot of what I would call generational continuity. They have a fairly close, well-established sense of identity with their group as a people, and so because of that, from one generation to the next, there's a lot of continuity and a lot of adoption of the previous generation's habits and ways of living and ways of doing things and thinking about things and so forth. And I think that this is probably because, at least in part, of their past in America, that we had a fairly strong institution of black slavery, especially in the South, and I think that can create that sort of deeper sense of identity. In fact, we could relate this biblically a little bit. I think if you look at the history of the Israelites, they're called Israelites because they're descended from the 12 sons of Jacob, who was also called Israel. But I don't think that fact is what knit their identity as a people. It's their shared experience as slaves in Egypt that knit that. And then once they were released from that at the Exodus, after crossing the Red Sea and all that kind of stuff, I think that's when they really became solidified as a people historically. So that kind of experience, I think, does that to people, and that I think that to some degree, black people in the United States have that. Now, what does that have to do with blacks going to Catholic churches? Well, here's the thing: because of that, black people today tend to go to the churches and think religiously the way their previous generations thought, which inherits from their previous generations, and ultimately at some point they inherit from that same religious sensibilities that they picked up while they were still slave generations, which had to do with their owners. So I think in large part many black people, without really recognizing this, without understanding this, but I think ultimately they inherit their religious outlook and their religious style and preferences from those slave owners that had a lot to do with shaping that early experience of black people in America by forcing them to be slaves. So here's, slave owners tended not to be Catholic. The Catholic Church has, I'm sure that if you do your historical digging, you'll be able to find your few examples that you can throw out as like some kind of pot shots against Catholics. Maybe you could even find a few notable examples or prominent examples. I don't know. But in general, the slave owners tended not to be Catholic, and that's why in America, the Catholic churches tend not to be strongly black, even when they are right in the middle of what might otherwise be dominantly black neighborhoods. So that's my historical answer. Now, I have another answer, which is this. And this has to do with more, let's suppose that we did start trying to do, specifically outreach to black families and black communities and that kind of stuff. I think we would struggle with this. And again, this is my very limited impression based on just a few limited interactions that I've had with people, but my overall impression of black people, I don't know if you would call it black culture or not, but those black families that I've happened to know tend to be a stronger patriarchal type of family. Now, I'm not talking about, the people will bring up things, when you say black, often people think in terms of, inner city, gangbanger, black, violent crime type areas. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the people who are strong family people, the kind who would tend to be church going and so forth. I think they tend to be fairly patriarchal. And the men in those families are very involved in the families and very involved in deciding what the tone of that family is. Now, I should take a moment to say that I don't think this means that the women are weak. In fact, I think that this kind of family tends to produce strong women. And so these patriarchal families, I think the women are very self-assured and strong as well. Yeah. But that's, I think it's just the way they are. Now, here's the thing. The Catholic Church in the past, couple of generations, has turned into a church that in many, many cases, there's a few exceptions, but in many cases, it's kind of run by women. There's the women who have the opportunities to, maybe they don't work because their husbands are working and they don't need the extra money, and so they're the ones who are at home, and so they can go to things like the parish council meetings and get involved in the liturgical planning and in planning this and that and the other. And so even things that should not necessarily be decided by committee or planned by committee, these committees nonetheless decide that they should be able to plan them or decide them, and they end up often browbeating the pastor into this or that or the other. And I think that feel as a kind of it kind of gives the feel of a lot of parishes as a women's church kind of thing. And I think that would keep modern Christian black families from becoming entirely enthusiastic about the Catholic Church. So those are my two. I don't know if either one of those answers is what you had in mind, because clearly you have something in mind that you've thought about and spent some time thinking about. But that's what I've been able to come up with.
My answer is much, much simpler. It's money. It all boils down to money.
Money.
I probably should have looked up some things, some statistics and stuff before I started. But look, if you go to urban America, in the inner city, it seems to be predominantly black and poor.
Mm-hmm.
And the Catholic school system in America is set up more as a business than as a corporal work of mercy. In other countries like Africa,
that's true.
It's not that way. We're there specifically to help people learn and get educations. And so the black communities, or the Catholic community in Africa is growing, and it's growing fast. Mm-hmm. In America, if you're going to a Catholic school, you're probably white privileged. And so
that's true. That's true.
When our schools are a way to make money, or a way to draw in parents who have money who can either donate or pay for the education, then you're going to get white people. And that's why Catholic Americans are white. I think it's really that simple.
That's true. But that I'll have to think about that for a little bit, because the thing that bothers me about that is the expectation that that the parish membership is necessarily tied to the school population. Because there are parishes, first of all, there's a few parishes that don't even have schools. And second of all, there are plenty of parishes where lots of the kids at the parish don't necessarily go to that school. We've been that kind of, we've been like that most of the places we've lived. There's been a few times when we tried to put the kids into the school, and the local Catholic school, and it's almost never worked out. In fact, we've almost always found that the amount of money that they're charging doesn't hold up to the expectation, not just of the education itself, but of the
Catholic education
level of Catholicity in the education. Yeah, exactly. So, but yeah, that's a good point. I never even thought of that. You're right. The way we do education in Catholic parishes, very, very geared towards white privilege.
And you might be able to make the argument that,
now,
I mean, you could say the reason there aren't many black Catholics is not because of how we do schooling in America, in Catholic America. But I can say definitely that if our mission work was to educate inner city kids, we would have a huge black presence in the Catholic Church.
Yeah.
And to me, the answer to this is so simple. But because our education system is a way for the parishes to make money, to me, I don't understand why a bishop would not know this right off the bat.
Well, that's true. That's true. That, when they look at the work of the church, that has to be one of the most glaring things, that There's people we're not reaching simply because we don't make our educational system available to them.
I mean, it's visible with the black community because there are more black poor families than there are wealthy black families. But it's not just blacks; it's poor white America as well. I mean, more and more people are dropping out. The church is shrinking. It seems from all the reports I've read, the church is shrinking, and I think it's precisely because of this. Because our dad and mom said that they went to a Catholic school, and they're saying it didn't cost them anything. That tuition really wasn't an issue.
Well, it sure cost them to send us to Catholic schools.
They had help there, and I think the only reason we were able to go to a Catholic school is we didn't have much money. But because Dad's so frugal and just the way he is, we were able to grow up in a neighborhood that was, the people around us had a lot more money than we did. And so when you've got a church or a school in a middle-class neighborhood without a whole lot of lower-class people there's enough money to go around to where those few families who need it can get it. Tuition help, I mean. And but if this were a poor area, we would not have gone to a Catholic church school, because the money to pay for it would not have been available. I know this because
that's right. The school itself wouldn't have had the aid.
Few years we were pretty poor, and we happened to be in a higher class area, and so the money was there, and we could send our kids for the first several years anyway to a Catholic school. But then the money wasn't there, and they said, no, you need to come up with tuition or go to a public school. So we went to a public school.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of sad that it's that kind of state of affairs. It's almost like it's clear that the schools, the education is not treated as a aspect of the ministry of the church in America. It's more of an opportunistic, hey, if you've got the money, you can take advantage of this opportunity, just like any private school.
Anyway, when I was reading this article in the Cincinnati Enquirer and looking at this discussion between, I think it was between the bishops and of the Catholic Church and a couple of other Christian churches, I was surprised how it wasn't even brought up. And I thought, if you get the kids, then you're going to have, it's going to pass down. But you got to get the kids. And if you want to get the kids, you got to get them in your schools.
Right.
It's just that simple to me.
That's true.
But anyway,
because let's say that you did, attract a group of adults, like in some inner city situation or whatever. You get adults, they join the church, they don't have money to send the kids to your school. They're very new to the faith. Maybe they even practice it enthusiastically, but they don't necessarily have the tools to transfer that to their own kids. So you only get it for a generation, and then you lose it again. Okay. Well, you know what? That actually.
Well, I was going to say, even now, you see people who say something. They say they're Catholic, and I mean, you know them well enough to know that they're only Catholic because they go to church once a week. They really don't live a Catholic life.
Oh, right.
But the only reason they say they're Catholic is because they went to 12 years of Catholic schooling. And so the Catholicity of them was put there by the school, and it will be handed down to their kids. Now, as far as really taking root and them having a relationship with God because of their Catholic religion is a whole different matter. But the fact that they are Catholic is there because of the schooling.
Well, you know, that's actually something that is going to tie into, or at least that I can relate to our topic today, which we're going to talk about the parable of the talents, it's often called. And it's kind of funny because when people interpret the parable, they often seize on the word talent and then try to relate it to talents that, gifts that you have as talents or skills that and so forth. But in reality, it's just a unfortunate and perhaps convenient homonym. The talent that they were referring to is actually a unit of money. And so you could really think of it as the parable of the coins or the parable of the money or something like that. I don't know.
I wonder if the word talent was in the English language is the way it is because of the parable of the talents.
Oh, could be. I don't know. Well, we'll see.
If anyone's
we could look that up sometime. Find out.
Probably my volume's doing weird things because I'm trying to adjust my microphone volume to where you cannot see the background noise, but you can see. I see it. I don't hear it. So I'm looking at wave patterns and stuff like that. But that's what's going on with me. All right, go ahead.
Oh, okay. That's fine. I can hear. I've been able to hear you for the most part throughout this, so I think we're good. So the parable of the talents is kind of interesting because it almost sounds like it's unfair. So the setup is you've got these three different people that are given various amounts of money to exercise stewardship over in the absence of their master, and two of them, the two with the greater amounts of money, invest them and then bring it back with interest when their master returns. The other one kind of doesn't do anything. He tucks it away, and then when his master returns, he gives it back to him. And the master, scolds him, takes the money away from him, gives it to the one who had more, and throws him out. And then it's interesting what Jesus says at the end. He said, "Those who have will receive more, and those who have not will lose even what little they have." And it's kind of it's like, well, wait a minute, the guy, it's not his fault that he was only given a little bit and that he only has a little bit. Therefore, I mean, even if he had invested it, he would only have a little bit to bring back, right? So it almost seems unfair. But I think Jesus is referring not to when he says those who have and have not. He's not referring to have in the sense of that's what they were given, but who have in the sense of having taken what they were given and invested it to bring about a return. And here's where it becomes useful to think about who is the master and what is the return we're talking about. In this case, I think this parable most directly applies not to our natural talents or physical talents or anything like that. I mean, everybody has talents, and people use this parable to say, well, you should use your talents and you should develop them and put them at the service of others and so on and so forth, instead of just letting them lie dormant or whatever. Well, okay, maybe. I think, people...
I wonder if he's a good or a bad
his physical
carpenter.
Talents,
we assume that he was a carpenter, but...
Could he run real fast?
Like, what if he was really bad at it? You could, even if... Because I know people who... Well, myself, I try really hard sometimes to, do finishing work, and I'll get, people helping me, and even after doing it for a long time, no matter how much I do it, no matter how hard I try, it looks really bad in the end. And I wonder if Jesus was like, I mean, he got into ministry instead of following
Joseph
his
always
dad's
having
footsteps.
to go over and redo it.
But I always wondered there had to have been some things that he was better at than other things.
Yeah. Yeah, so, just the natural genetic makeup of his body and stuff like that would tend to suggest that.
I wonder if he was good in sports, or as a kid, they would play games and he was better than other people, but then sometimes, if he was playing Marco Polo, because he just...
Oh, yeah, did he hold back?
He's out of water.
I know, right where you are.
Fish out of water, but he's actually on the water. He's not out of the water, so other kids would call him on that. Fish out of water.
Instead of trying to swim, I'll just get up and walk.
And they would complain, but he would be like,
That's
you
right.
know what? You can do it too. Just take my hand like he did with Peter. And then
it's just a talent I have.
And then they touch his hand, and then they're it. Just tricks them.
Yeah.
I always wondered about that anyway. All right, what were you about to say?
That would be interesting. Marco Polo with Jesus.
And I interrupted you.
Okay, so the thing is, though, I think that this parable really applies to our spirituality and our faith. So I think that the different amounts of monies that the master, invested with his servants is kind of like the different opportunities that we have to learn and develop our own faith. You've got people like us who grew up in a Catholic family, were sent to Catholic schools at a time when Catholic schools were pretty Catholic still. And our parents took the faith very seriously, and we grew up in that environment. And so we had a lot of opportunity to learn and to know about the faith and to use it to develop real personal relationships with God and so on and so forth. And on the other hand, you've got people who hardly have any opportunity. Maybe they have a aunt that they see once a year who happens to be Catholic or who happens to be Christian even, and that's their only exposure to Christianity, to even what a Christian person is like, or something like that. And when you think about this parable, so the way the master scolded the one who had just a tiny bit of money and he tucked it away, Jesus kind of picked on the one with a little bit to be the one who also underperformed. And I don't think the parable was necessarily meant to say, to suggest that there's always going to be that kind of correlation, because what Jesus didn't come out and say explicitly is, now, think of the person with the 500 coins or the 5 talents or whatever it was, the one who had the most. What if he had just tucked his money away and not invested it or anything like that? And when he brought it back, all he had was the original. How much worse would his treatment have been by the master if he had done something like that? So now when we think about our opportunities to access and develop and attain knowledge of and grow in the faith and in our relationship with God and in prayer and so on and so forth, and apply that parable to us. So, yeah, sure, you've got people who have more or less opportunity. And, yeah, the people with little opportunity, if they do nothing with it, they're still going to lose their souls. We are born into a state not of salvation. We're not born saved. We don't come into this world with something to lose. We come into this world with something to gain. We have to gain salvation somehow. And, many people will not accomplish that, and they won't accomplish it because they don't even try. They won't at least try to learn about it or to invest even a little bit of time and hey, what's this gospel stuff anyway? But what about those of us who grew up with it and then choose to turn away from it and apply that parable of the talents now to that? We're the people who were given, the large sum to invest, and we're taking and not only not investing it, we're squandering it. The person who takes that upbringing and continues on the momentum of going to church once a week but does nothing else spiritually, he's kind of the person who's burying the money and bringing it back at the end and say, well, here it is. Here's what you gave me. And he's, they're not even going to fare very well, right? So that's, I think, the real, the right way to understand this parable is to relate it to our spirituality and to the opportunities that we have to develop that spirituality and to develop our understanding of God and of the faith and so on and so forth. And of course, there are people who have very little opportunity, and like Jesus said, even they will lose what they have if they don't develop it. Well, when there's that person in front of us who maybe he's heard something about it, maybe he has a question or something like that, and it's just idle curiosity. He's not really interested in becoming Catholic, but there's an opportunity. God's giving him the 1 or 2 coins there. What's he going to do with it? Well, we might be that catalyst for him to say, wait a minute, that sounds like something that maybe I should look into further. Maybe even just by inviting him, hey, you know what, if you have any other questions about this stuff, I love talking about it.
So it's not just
feel free to
learning more
go get
about
lunch
it,
or something.
But spreading it to other people and using it to glorify God the way he expects us to do.
The way God
the way Jesus
wants, and that's kind of the additional side of it. So on the one hand, there's this personal aspect of the parable. We have the opportunity. Do we develop that opportunity that we have to create an interior return on that investment, on God's investment in us? But then there's that. So faith itself is a gift. So God gives us the faith. He gives us the opportunity to grow, and he gives us, the mind to develop our knowledge and our relationship with him. Now, what do we do with that? And here's where parents should be very concerned about this parable, because how do parents take the investment that God put in them and create a return on that through their children, and in how they raise their children, and in how they bring their children up and teach their children to be comfortable in prayer and to see God as a reality that's there on a personal level all the time, and to teach those children to understand the faith and to learn the faith, and not just, let's do our weekly habit or whatever. And that's where I think the other side of the parable is, there's the interior side that has to do with opportunity, and then having taken advantage of that opportunity, we now have something else that itself is a gift from God, an investment that God made in us. We have to make good on that too, and bring interest back to God by giving it to our children and passing it down through the generations. And I think that's where this ties into your ideas and your thoughts about Catholic schools in America. As a church, are we, by not treating education as a ministry of the parish, by treating it as, a money maker on the one hand, or an upper class privilege on the other hand, are we burying God's investment in us? Are we failing to bring that interest return on what God gave us to be stewards of?
It would seem that way, and I mean, if you look at the various ministry, if you go to any parish and go through what they do, there's always a poor basket or something like that. But it's been my experience,
Right.
and maybe it's because I'm not heavily involved in the parish enough in any parish enough to really pay attention to what's going on. But it just seems like the vast majority of the ministries focus on the upper class. I mean, that's I mean,
What do you mean?
look at the various ministries that are in the church in a specific in any parish. You've got communion distribution. There usually is some kind of poor box or something that they do, but there's the youth ministries. They have
which often that involves doing things that they might have to travel somewhere or whatever, so parents have to be able
every
to come
now
up
and then
with
they
money
have
for that.
like a missionary trip where they go to a poor nation where they do stuff. They've got marriage
but
counseling.
what do they do? They have to do fundraising, and then parents still have to end up paying for that. For the trips. Yeah, marriage counseling. That's kind of
for the parish couples
that's not
who are
necessarily
already
a poor
there
thing
in the parish, and again, it's mostly white, middle to upper class.
Well, and I think a lot of parishes, at least a lot of parish leaders who may listen to this, may object within their particular parish. They can probably roll out, a scroll of ministries that they do that are targeted to the poor. But here's the thing about that I think most of the churches, the American parishes' ministry to the poor is focused on the bodily needs of the poor to the exclusion of this idea that you're talking about of passing on the faith and giving them the opportunity to grow up in an educational environment that is authentically Catholic. So they're, it's almost like they're taking their coins, their money, and instead of investing it in a return of that same coinage, it's like they're investing it to get, it's like they got paid dollars, and what they're going to do is come back with a return in pesos or something like that. That you can't even spend here in America, right? Well, God gives us faith and grace, and when it comes to the poor, I mean, He said, "Feed the poor." And yes, we should feed them bodily, but we look at the poor and we just feed them bodily, and we don't give a return on that grace that God gave us that can be redeemed in heaven.
Yeah.
That's and that's what we're missing. We need to see this as a real commandment to pay attention to how we use our faith and how we use that investment God made in us of grace and of our spiritual relationship with Him to pass that on to the next generation. And of course, as parents, that first responsibility has to be our kids, but then looking at ourselves as communities and as parishes, how do we address that within that, especially given that there are people who just physically, monetarily don't have the means to pay the tuition costs of Catholic education. Now, some people will say, well, yeah, but they can come to, CCD and stuff like that.
Why would they, though?
I don't think that quite cuts it, because that's the same thing as that 1 hour a week of going to church and calling that your spiritual life. Yeah. So you have an hour a week that you come and spend time talking about some, program of Catholic education, and then call that your religious education, where, on the other hand, if you're, like you said, white privileged, you get to go to an environment where, and again, there's it's debatable in a lot of parishes whether this is really true today, but you get to go to an environment where the entire day is spent receiving a full rounded education that's completely within a Catholic view. So your entire education is also part of a religious spiritual development.
A Catholic culture. And you can't create a Catholic culture if you're not if they're not immersed in it the way they would be in a Catholic school.
Right. CCD does not make a Catholic culture. Now, a lot of the parents who send their kids to CCD, maybe they are doing everything that they can at home to try to create that Catholic culture. But, it's hard to bring that into the mind and heart of your child when you don't have that child many hours out of the day because he has to go to school. He goes to a public school, no Catholic culture there. He comes home. They love to load kids up with homework these days. So he gets home, and maybe he has a sport to play, and then maybe he has a couple hours of homework. You hardly see that child at all.
You've got
How
your
much
own
of
things.
your
You've got to
home
cook dinner. You've got to clean the house. You've got to fix the car, and
It's
just
So, but even if you can somehow bring that Catholic culture to those things that you do, the meals, for example, and stuff like that, how much of that is your child going to really absorb if you only see him a couple hours a day? So you want a place to send him to school that's going to have that continuity of Catholic culture with the home.
Definitely.
Rather than competing with it. So, that's, it's kind of, I never even realized how you were, where you were going with this disparity of black membership in Catholic parishes.
And it just kind of fit right in with the subject because
I think
you chose the subject, and
exactly.
it just kind of fell right in line there.
And by the way, I want to point out something else. We could almost we just keep kind of topic jumping with things that are fairly related today. So. Talking about black disparity and that kind of stuff. And last week we were talking about was it? It was I forget if it was last week or if it was in one of the other weeks, but where the bishops they're getting into the disputes over the the pointing fingers in the scandal, and the one guy said about they just don't like the Pope because they're racist and he's Latino or something like that. And we kind of said, well, racism, you don't really see that anymore anyway, and I stand by what I said. The organizations are out there, but I don't think they're really mainstream. Right. But there is one exception, and I'm going to bring this up because they don't get recognized for the racists that they are, and that exception is Planned Parenthood.
Yeah.
Planned Parenthood has, I don't know if you've seen this, but they have this recent marketing campaign where they put these billboards in the poor black areas with, I don't know, a few women. Maybe it's like a mom and daughter or a grandma and an aunt and a daughter or something like that. The few black women kind of standing there. And the billboard says, "Abortion is self-care." Wow. So here's this organization marketing to black people to get them to want abortions. This is exactly in line with Planned Parenthood's history and Planned Parenthood's foundings. People don't, I think, realize who Margaret Sanger, the founder of Planned Parenthood, really was. That she was very much a white supremacist. And a eugenicist. She believed in purging the gene pool of the human race. In fact, that's what the term Planned Parenthood means, is that she wanted a world in which parenthood was planned by the government so that only the right kinds of people would be born. Planned Parenthood was founded. It would not be. It's not out of line to say that Planned Parenthood was founded as a non-political extension of the German Nazi Party, because it really was. And you can see in these billboards that they have, and in these marketing campaigns that they have today, you can see that they continue to be true to that founding and to those
it comes
original
out in the
purposes.
Numbers because, all right, I just looked up real quick the statistics on race. Blacks get more than twice as many abortions as white people. I think is abortions per 1,000 women.
2/3.
On white is 10. Black is 27.1. It's terrible.
Wait a minute. Are you talking percents?
Abortion rates. Abortions per 1,000 women.
Oh, per 1,000 women.
Age 15 to 44. So out of
not
1,000 women,
abortions.
10 have had abortions with whites, 27.1 with blacks.
Right. And when you look at, that just shows on a per woman basis, but when you consider multiple abortions that a woman could have, I think that if you took the black versus white, it would even be more stark. That Planned Parenthood is really still working very hard to eliminate.
All right, we got race. It's like 48 minutes so far. We got current events, even though we're actually happened last week. We don't have a whole lot, but let's see. There was a teacher fired.
Yeah, I've been out of the current events.
There's a teacher fired for forcing a student to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Fired for asking a student to stand. Wow, but still, he wanted to be.
You're at school. You stand when the teacher says stand, and sit when they say sit.
Sit or kneel or something, but I don't know.
Oh, was he?
Well, I don't know. Philadelphia naked bike ride. That was a couple weeks ago. That is a thing.
That's a thing?
Thousands of people take their clothes off and ride a bike, which sounds incredibly uncomfortable to me.
I would. It does, and I just think if you're wiped out,
or like
you don't have
crash,
any
like a
protection at all,
like 6 people bump into each other. Ouch!
Oh,
I would never want to be in that.
Yeah.
Huh.
No. That's one of those. I don't know. They got to be making some kind of point.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is.
Something about fuel consumption and body image. Huh. I would imagine that would do worse for body image because not everybody looks. Yeah.
Fuel consumption.
Well, it's a bike ride, so like.
You mean like
not using gasoline, I guess.
Oh, that's what the point you're looking up about the bike ride. Okay.
Because it has to be a protest, otherwise
draw attention to body image.
They would be arrested for indecent exposure. Because you can't just drive around naked. But if you're doing a protest,
I see.
Then you can.
I see. I think they're probably people that they're just perverts and they're using that as an excuse.
I guess
to streak
or to watch
in public.
Okay, so there was a protest. Speaking of protests, there was a protest. I can't remember where it was. There was vegans protesting a butcher. So he took meat and threw it at them. It made them all sick, traumatized.
Huh? Did they? I was gonna say, did
they all converted?
They all have PTSD now.
And I think Peter Strzok was finally fired. I don't know why he was there so long, but he's finally gone from the FBI. That's all I got.
Oh, yeah.
Not much going on.
Yeah, well, like I said, I've been out of the current events loop myself for a couple of weeks, it seems. I haven't checked my Twitter feed in days. Although there is something kind of interesting. It's kind of personal. I'm going to put it on Facebook, but I'll fuzz out the name. So one of my sons got a driver's license recently, and when they do that, they say, "Oh, okay, do you want to register to vote?" Well, yeah, you may as well go ahead. But my phone number was associated with the registration, so I got this text message from somebody with the Indiana Democratic Party, and reaching out, assuming, okay, this is a young person, because he is, and hey, we're going to reach out and try to get him involved maybe in some political action and stuff like that. And so reached out, hey, wondering what, congratulations on registering to vote. Let us know what issues you care about, health care or student debt reform, whatever. So I just decided to write back, even though it was really to my son, but it came to my phone, right? And I just wrote back, I said, ending abortion is my number one issue.
This is from the Democratic
I thought, well,
Party?
let's see what they do with that. Now, this is the Democratic Party, Indiana Democratic Party. So, here's the thing. I didn't say, well, I'm a Republican, and I didn't say, well, I don't, agree with Democrat principles or anything like that. I just said, well, she asked, what are your issues? I said, well, ending abortion. That's there for me. That's my number one. Her response was, oh, thank you for letting me know. I'll remove you from our list. In other words, the Democratic Party in Indiana, pro-lifers are not welcome. That's the message. Now, I'm gonna like I said, I'm gonna fuzz out my son's name and post it on Facebook sometime too. But that's if you want to know where the Democratic Party is, and how any Catholic could be a Democrat, could work for a Democrat candidate, vote for a Democrat candidate. I don't get it.
I don't either.
It is so clear cut to me that you're in lose your soul danger space to support a Democratic candidate for office in the United States today, or to support that party in any way in the United States today. But nonetheless, somehow people they twist whatever knots of logic.
Well, we need to. We're eventually gonna need to actually do a show or a podcast on that, because as November gets closer, and we always dance around that subject, but we don't always tackle it, or we've never tackled it head on. So
that's true.
Sometime in the next in the next month, we're gonna have to actually talk about it.
Yes, good point. Certainly,
that's all we got. Thanks for listening.
Okay, well, thanks for joining and for listening.
Thanks
I shouldn't say joining. It's not like a radio broadcast, is it? You can listen anytime you want.
Like going to communion, you're making Jesus' sacrifice real, and you're participating. So when they listen to it, they're participating
present to
with
you,
what we're doing right now, this second. Yeah, thanks for joining.
Same thing. Yeah. Or it's kind of like, like the Who, right? Join together with the band.
Okay. Well, thanks for listening, and think about what we said, and we'll see you next week. Oh, this is a podcast about CatholicThings.com. I always got to remember to say that.
That's great. All right. Thanks.